Great. All right, JD, thank you. I'm really excited to hear from everyone on the panel. We've got people that I believe were in the deepest trenches that are out there, which is in the red counties. So a little bit about me. I had the great honor of representing our country in 2 wars for 7 years, which I think prepared me well when I got back to my beautiful home state in Utah to run in a district that was half the state. Followed the old Pony Express Trail in an 18-year-old truck and did about 8,000 miles in 2020. I was running against a real big Trumper, got just under 37%. But like a lot of our panelists, my district had the downtown skyscrapers of Salt Lake City, and then it was gerrymandered along the Nevada line down to Arizona and had mainly alfalfa, red rock, and a lot of county roads. So the title that I'm most proud about is not actually former candidate and potentially future candidate. It's actually I'm a writer and an author. So at some point I want to come back to Wallace Stegner because I think he really understood rural people, particularly here in the great American West, but also understood, I think, rural issues, rural challenges, and most importantly, rural resilience. So now I want to introduce, but I decided rather than have me talk about each of you, the writer that I am, I think each of you in your own voices will be more meaningful. So JD, we'll start with you and then move to Christina, Jon, and then Secretary Espy. After the brief introductions, and if you're too humble, I'll correct the record because I've got a good cheat sheet. We'll move to a set of questions. We'll look at the chat box, and for anyone who wants to raise questions, I'll be sure to focus there. And then we'll wrap up at about 3:45 Eastern or 1:45 Mountain Time. So JD, over to you.
All right. So my name is JD Scholten. I am a board member of One Country. I ran for Congress in Iowa's 4th District in 2018. In a district that Trump won by 27, we ended up moving the needle 24 points and losing by 3 in 2018. Decided to run again in 2020. Steve King lost his primary and a lot of other things, and we didn't do too well and lost again. And then from that, still staying active politically. I'm the executive director of ruralvote.org, and I am also a senior advisor at the American Economic Liberties Project. And so that's me. I'll pass it over to Jon, or no, Christina, I believe.
Oh, thank you, JD. I'm Christina Hale. I'm an Indiana girl. I was born and raised here in the Hoosier Heartland. And actually in 2012, I first ran for office. I was the only Democratic pickup statewide for the Indiana General Assembly that year, but I only won by 51 votes out of about 36,000 cast. But it had been a forever Republican district, and I actually went on to run for a lieutenant governor in 2016, the same year that then Governor Pence received his really unexpected promotion to run on the ticket as vice president. And that election did not go as we had hoped. But in 2020, I ran for U.S. Congress in Indiana 5, which is a rural urban district. It's got a little bit of everything. And the closest anyone had come before was a 14-point spread. But I put up a real fight, and I got pretty close, just 4 points away from flipping that district blue. But this experience has really kind of informed my attitude toward how winnable seats really are. And you win some, you lose some in places like Indiana. But when you field quality candidates and you outwork them, you can also win. And I've seen it here a number of times. I'm also the deputy chair for my state's party as deputy chair for candidate recruitment. And I'm writing a book too. It's called Why Not You? A Leadership Guide for the Changemakers of Tomorrow. And its premise is pretty simple. You know, if you're driven by your why, if you're a cause-driven young person, you're probably a servant leader. So you need to take that servant leader attitude and apply it to pursuing positional leadership. And so we'll see. I'll let you all know when it publishes in a few months. But I just am grateful to be included on this panel. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Christina. I'll go next. I'm Jon Hoadley. I ran in Michigan's 6th Congressional District last cycle. I'm coming off the heels of serving for the last 6 years in the state legislature. And I had one of those districts that has, 5 of my 6 counties are very rural, and I had one more urban county. And, figuring out how you try to navigate that divide. In my neck of the woods in Michigan, we're a battleground state. And I'm in Southwest Michigan. So it's part of the state that Democrats haven't invested in for a long time. And if we want to be able to win everywhere, then we've got to be making sure that we're doing work everywhere. Since the 2020 election, where we came up short of getting the victory that we wanted, I've been proud to be able to continue work, doing advising, strategic advising, and working with a number of in-state, national donors interested in investing in different parts of the country and different parts of our state to make sure that we're changing the ground moving forward. I am thrilled that we're having a conversation about disinformation and misinformation because that was definitely aspects that came during my campaign. And, I'm not writing a book, but I am thrilled that we have so many other authors on the call. And I'm excited to be able to stay involved. I will note we're in the middle of redistricting right now in Michigan with an independent commission for the first time ever. And they are drawing some significantly different lines. So stay tuned. But on that note, I'll turn the mic over to Secretary Espy.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Espy. Excuse my very, very raspy voice. I've been speaking a lot here lately, but I'm so glad to join this family, one country family. I'm a recent board member. I've been on the board maybe for 3 months now, and so I'm really happy to get to see JD. I've been on calls with you, but this is my first time seeing you in real life. So thank you guys, and I'm glad to be on this panel. All right, well. Right now, I'm practicing law in Mississippi. I'm a solo practitioner. But when it comes to electoral politics, I guess I've won some and lost some. I was Mississippi's first Black Assistant Attorney General back in the 1980s. And I decided to leave that career and to try to become the first African American ever elected to the Congress from Mississippi in 1986. So I left that job. I threw my hat in the ring. I was 29 years old, and I won. I won from a district that was not majority Black. It was majority Black in population, but not in BVAP, voter age population. So I won it against a 2-term incumbent Republican who had been a very prominent circuit judge. And I just did it because I didn't know I could lose. I put in the shoe leather. I talked to everybody, irrespective of race or gender. And I won by less than 1.5%. And that was in the same year with John Lewis. So we went to the historic 100th Congress. And we became fast friends. And I was reelected 3 times in succession. So when I was elected my 4th term, that's when I was working with Bill Clinton with a former quasi-democratic party organization where he was the chairman and I was one of 3 VPs. And I endorsed President Clinton. I was one of his circuit speakers. I didn't have a raspy voice back then. And I just went everywhere. And then when he won the presidency, he turned to me and asked me to leave the Congress and become his Secretary of Agriculture. And I really hesitated to do that because, I was getting reelected. There was no trouble winning in a district that had been redistricted to like 62%. When I won the first time, it was, as I said, not majority Black. It was redistricted to become safe. But I left there because if you look at the mission and the programs of USDA beyond farm programs is rural development, rural housing, rural healthcare, rural utilities. And I decided that's where I would try to make the mark in a very rural district like mine in Mississippi, as well as yours, everybody that's on the call. So I was there for 2.5 years. Then I came back to law practice for about 15 years. And then I got another itch to throw my hat in the ring for the United States Senate. Had never been tried by an African American candidate before. And this is during the Donald Trump year, his first election in 2018. So I ran against in a special election because the Republican was ill and left office. And there was 2 years left in the term. I resigned my law practice and I ran for it against a candidate that our governor had selected. And Donald Trump came into Mississippi with all the prominence of Air Force One 3 times. And I think because of him, in many ways, he put his imprimatur on her. And we did very, very well. We got 46.3% of the vote. In Mississippi, a state with only 38% Black population. So we failed, but 60,000 more votes I would have won. So I decided that I'd try again. So I spent the next 2 years trying to see where we had come up short. And when the full cycle came around, I ran again in 2020, just recently. And I retooled the organization. I raised $16 million, which had been a problem earlier. I'd only raised $6 million. And that money didn't come in until September and October, the November race. So I just spent 2 years raising money. And again, we did very, very well. In the highest turnout in Mississippi's history, 1.31 million people. It was like 130,000 more people than 2 years before. We got 44.2% of the race. And I said, how come I didn't do better? Well, it was a presidential race, okay? Here's Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. And if you had 44, my opponent got the same number of votes, 54% in 2018, 54% in 2020. Well, they found an independent candidate that was kind of moderate, and he got my 2%. So even though the Black vote was up about 3% more, higher than ever, and I got more votes than any Democrat in Mississippi's history who had ever run for federal office, including Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama. I beat them all in 2020. And interestingly, we got more Republican crossover votes than any Democrat who ran for Senate in the 2020 cycle in the nation, except for Doug Jones in Alabama and the governor in Montana. I came at number 3 as a crossover recipient as an African American. We still lost because when Donald Trump turned to his base and told them to vote in person in 2020, the turnout among rural whites was up by 10 percentage points on that day only. So that's why we lost. So it was an experience. I tried it twice. So now what I'm doing is helping others who might care to run for Mississippi and elsewhere. I tried to build a bridge to cross myself. I didn't quite make it, but the bridge is 3/4 finished. And I'm turning my attention to raising money, giving money to others who might care to run in rural areas. That's why I joined One Country Board of Directors, to make sure I could add my voice to theirs, to create a platform that will embrace rural values and let urban Democrats understand that there is such a thing as rural America, and they vote too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Espy and everyone else. We're going to move into the questions now, and this isn't so much rapid fire, but I know we've got a lot of people that are watching, and thank you all for joining us online. I want to make sure we get the collective wisdom to all of you, and I'll keep my comments brief, maybe circle back at the end briefly for some of my own points. The first question gets to what Stegner wrote about. He said, life is about scar tissue and callus, and I think each of you has a lot of the callus is still on your hand, and I'm sure quite a bit of scar tissue, hopefully, that you point to proudly. So what's a memorable moment or a story from the campaign trail that really stuck with you, maybe following some of the themes that we've talked about this week through the One Country Summit? So maybe we'll start with you, Christine, and then anyone else who'd like to follow. And let's try and keep on pace, because I think we've got about half an hour, and I want to make sure we get through as much of this as we can. So Christine, where's your scar tissue?
Oh, thank you. It's Christina, actually. I was actually the first Latina to ever run statewide or for U.S. Congress in Indiana, believe it or not. But my scar tissue, I guess, comes from not being able to buy a whole lot of energized young people and old people a lot of cold pizza, and to be together and experience that whole kind of fun nexus of what it's like to campaign. And it was just so surreal, to be campaigning from my dining room with my call time manager, who went back actually to Fargo to spend some time with her parents in isolation. And even now I try to get out and meet with some of our campaign fellows and volunteers, and just go for a walk on the Monon Trail, buy them some coffee, and just try to bring some of that experience to them, and just in a nostalgic way, because everybody was still engaged. But I think especially our young people were going through such angst and isolation that it broke my heart, and I still want to make that up to them.
Great. We could talk maybe about how running during COVID affected everything. And anyone else want to tell a campaign war story?
Yeah, I got one. Real quick, so Christina, I want to echo what you said, right? We missed some of the best parts of the campaign, and the being with each other, those pieces. And we still had to deal with some of the worst parts of the campaign. The QAnon, the folks that are peddling conspiracy theories, they were empowered in a world where even more folks were online. Things that scar tissue I point to is, the fact that I had some QAnon crazies throwing pamphlets of information on my driveway, right? And running as an openly gay person in a rural district, and then having them come and potentially be near my family, be near my friends. It's a gross invasion of privacy that's fueled by people who do not care about good public policy or the health, security, and safety of our country. So I point to it both with pride, that we stood up and we were fighting for the things that are right, but also as a reminder that we got a lot to do so other people don't have to deal with that type of scar tissue in the future.
Got one. And this one is from the 2018 Senate campaign, because in 2020, we didn't have a lot of outdoor events. So this is from an outdoor event in 2018 in extreme northeast Mississippi. Hard scrabble, white, rural, Ozark-looking demographics and terrain. So it was July 4th, 2018. And I'm the third speaker. And it was an outdoor event in a parade ground. And the candidates had to speak from a flatbed truck. And I noticed that I'm the third candidate, and the one before me spoke awfully long time. So after I was introduced, I went up the steps and I'm about to speak, but I decided to whisper to the moderator, how much time do I have? And he looked at me and he said, you see this tree above you? And there was a big oak tree with branches spreading far out. I said, yes. He said to me, do you see that rope hanging from a bridge. And of course, there was no rope. And I didn't say anything. He said, "You have 3 minutes. If you speak longer than 3 minutes, we're going to bring that rope down, put it around your neck, and drag your ass away from here." Everybody's looking at me. I'm about to take the podium as my first address in that area of the state. I started to leave, but I said, he's just ignorant, okay? This is not like 2016, where I went to those venues and warmly embraced. This is 2018 with all the polarization and racism. So I just made my pitch. But I said, my God, here we go. This is going to be extremely difficult. So that's it. But I will say this. In 2020, I won 3 Trump counties. Donald Trump, Mike Espy. Not that county, but 3 very rural counties. Voted for Donald Trump for president and Mike Espy for senator. So he began to change with outreach, but it did that day. It was pretty rough. Thank you.
It's powerful. JD?
I can't go after that. I mean, it just, I think what the feeling I got from hearing that was the feeling of when I had to call Steve King to concede. And that feeling was one of the lowest feelings I ever had in my life. I'm a competitor. I grew up in sports and just, we gave it everything we had. And to keep in mind, like my district, we have 70,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. And King won by 20 every single time. And for us I was a little bit naive in thinking what we could do. But basically, my mindset was, Winnebago RVs are made in our district. I'm going to buy a used Winnebago. I'm going to throw my logo on the side, and I'm just going to go nonstop. And we did that, and we went to all 39 counties at least 3 times. The first time I went, people were like, "God bless you. Somebody should run against that guy." The second time was, "Oh, you're just not Steve King. You're actually running for something." And the third time, we got that momentum, and that we got people who, I wouldn't say were ashamed to be Democrats, but they were bullied or they were quiet Democrats because nobody's come close in this district. And so by that third time, you saw that momentum. You saw people put yard signs in their yards for the first time in a long, long time, and just that excitement. And so for me to see that buildup, but then all for it to go crashing down on election night to have to call him. And I don't think he ever got a call from a Democrat before to concede. But I had to do it, and just just soul sucking to have to talk to him. But he's no longer in office, and we can move on.
Great. Well, I want to shift now to kind of what did you hear on the trail and some of the issues that came up. You know, we've talked about disinformation and, you know, defund the police, socialism. What were some of the things that were front and center, and how did you address those challenges and stay on message and maybe pivot to what you wanted to talk about as opposed to maybe how the conversation started and all the diners that you all sat in for, if you could, or at least online, having the conversation with the voters? Anyone? Christina, Jon, Secretary Espy, anyone want to address sort of the messaging given those issues?
Sure. I'll jump right in and just say, for me, it was all about being relentless. And I always imagine myself playing Queen of the Mountain and people trying to push me off message and push me off that mountain. And you just can't let them. And I think one of the strategies that frustrated a lot of my supporters and volunteers, because, you know, Club for Growth was extremely active in this race. There was like $20 million spent from IEs, you know, on television. And it was everything from defund the police to socialism to lying about taxes. And I live in a mansion, you know, which my neighbors get a big kick out of, like things like that. But you know, a lot of times your supporters just want you to get out there and refute, you know, and I would say, well, the Indy Stars refuted all these claims, you know, but that wasn't good enough for them. And they want you to be on TV talking about all the spaghetti at the wall that they've thrown at you. And what I found is that your control and your consistency in message just comes from being relentless and talking about the issues that motivate you, because we all do this because we are white people. You know, it's because we care. It's because these are the issues facing people. And when you see little kids in your town, you know, sitting outside of like Taco Bells trying to catch the free Wi-Fi just so they can participate in their classwork during a campaign season, you know, families are having all kinds of feelings, and you have to zero in on those. And I'm really proud of my campaign and how we managed not to get distracted by the millions and millions of dollars of noise out there.
Well, for me, I mean, really, it was less of a problem because Mississippi is a small state, 3 million people that have been in politics, you know, for 20 years. So they tried all of that, you know, Bernie Sanders, socialist, Joe Biden, acolyte, you know, when George Floyd was murdered, you know, it was almost like I was right there in the street, you know. So, but nobody believed it. No one who knew me believed it because I could refute it with my record. So I just talked about rural health care, you know, and keeping the hospitals open and Medicaid expansion and $15 minimum wage. And I had enough money to refute all of that. You know, you can't let them, you know, provide a narrative on you if you have the resources to refute it. So even though I had $16 million, I wish the money would have come in February. But like you, Christina, call time. And finally, it reaches the ears of the National Democratic Party that this person might have a reasonable chance of winning. And the money begins to come in. And for me, it was August, you know. So so they can, you know, my mom always said, it doesn't matter what they call you, it only matters what you answer to. So I didn't answer to socialist or Bernie Sanders acolyte. I answered to Senator Espy and tried to carry myself as such. And so all of that stuff just bounced off my shoulders. Okay.
You know, one thing I'd say here that was hard about the environment last year is that, you know, my part of the state, Southwest Michigan, we're living in a media desert. You know, we got a Sinclair station, we got a has-been newspaper, we've got one that's local and pretty active, and then we got a whole bunch of community newspapers. But if you try to talk to them about politics, they said they don't want to cover it. So this idea that we could, that in a campaign like mine, that we could continue to just talk about the things that we wanted to talk about, well, we couldn't always afford to pay for that communication, even though we eventually did make it on the red to blue list. You know, we did put record-setting fundraising dollars up for this district. And because we're wedged in between an expensive Grand Rapids media market and a Chicago media market, we couldn't afford to drive the conversation every time. And one thing I think that we need to be better at as we think about winning rural campaigns in the future is the type of expenditures that we're going to need to do that we're going to have to pay for. So that way then folks aren't opting out of our communication, but our issues, our policies, our stories are part of everyday conversations, aren't exactly the type of spending that folks in DC always want to see. And if we want to win in more rural areas, we got to be open to running campaigns that are going to be more successful in rural areas too.
I kind of want to follow up on that, in that I think the way we run campaigns, as the Democrats, we rely too much on campaigns. You know, like for our campaign, if we didn't organize, there wouldn't be much organizing in our area. And so having that infrastructure in place where it's year round, so we can continue to have quality data, which was another issue. In a district like mine, I need as many independent voters as we can get, yet we had 60,000 independent voters in Van that we had no access to. And it's things like that. And call time is call time. We have to raise money. I get that. But I think there's an opportunity right now when we see the small dollar donations and the online donations, if there's a way to allocate that, that we get an opportunity to go out and talk to more people, I think it would have a huge impact on our campaigns, especially in these rural communities. I was doing call time in my RV in where you can barely get cell phone service type of situation, as much as we can. But at the end of the day, you look at who candidates talk to the most, and it's consultants and it's donors. We need to talk to people more. And I think as a party, that is something that we have an opportunity to change, especially with the amount of online donations we're getting, and to change our strategy. I feel is something that we really need to pivot going forward.
Great. I think that leads well into kind of a two-part, wrap up. We've got about 10, 12 minutes to go, and not as much time as I think we'd all like, but gets to the advice question, which I think you've somewhat covered already, but maybe you want to go deeper on that. And then overall, what are the takeaways? What are the things that, with all of our great listeners around the country who care about rural America and care about keeping the fabric of our country from further ripping apart, what would you tell them? Each of you have about 2 minutes, or 1 to 2 minutes, maybe a bit more.
Well, I'd say tell them to really look at the environment. That will determine victory or the other outcome. In my race, I think it was said before, I knew the Democratic Party in Mississippi wasn't very strong, honestly. But I'd never been in the bowels of it. It was so weak. Mississippi, we had to pay them for the voter file. We had to give money to the party to get the voter file. So I had to build my own. So the first thing is help to build the party early. If you want to try to run, so be it. God bless you. But help build the party early for you and for others. Also in Mississippi, between 2016 and 2020, the 2 presidential races, voter registration in Mississippi was less than 1%. Whereas in Georgia, it was 12% increase. Mississippi was less than 1%. Because Republicans had purged the rolls of 40,000 voters. I didn't know it until I was actually in there. And I could have reached out early to some voter registration organizations to come in a year before and help remedy that problem. So understand the environment.
Great. How about someone follow up? Maybe JD, you lead us off on big takeaways, and then Jon and Christina.
Yeah, for me, I will say this, that I've had to run a certain way because that's who I am in the district I run in. I'm not trying to be anti-establishment. I'm not trying to challenge the system or anything. What I'm trying to do is win the darn election. And what I see and what I call out are ways that we're not doing that, in ways that we have potential that just, it seems just obvious. And so for me, one of the things I do talk about a lot, especially to folks who are watching this, who are active, whether you're a party chair or whatever you are, is that we are the party. We all are the party. We can complain about the party, but until we do something, you have to get engaged with the party. There's the way that I've seen so many people try and do stuff outside the party, and I get that. I get frustrated with things as much as the next person. But at the end of the day, we are all the party, and if you want a difference, I'll give you the best advice I got in my entire time running. There's a gentleman and some of the national DNC folks who might be on this call named Frank Lemaire from South Sioux City, the other side of the river from me in Nebraska. He was a member of the Native American Caucus and the head chair of that for a while. He's a family friend, and he told me, JD, if you want change, you have to get uncomfortable. And once you get uncomfortable, you have to get others uncomfortable. And so for all of our districts and in all of our places where we're not winning, we have to do something different. And that different is getting uncomfortable, having those conversations, going out, meeting with people, and that's how you get change. And so, again, once you get uncomfortable, you got to get other people uncomfortable, and that's the best advice I got.
And we sure as hell need to make our national party uncomfortable, because this is about de-escalation of political violence, which I'll come back to. John, Christina, how about you go next, and then John?
Okay, I will say change is here, more change is coming, and to JD's point about being uncomfortable, we have to get not only comfortable, but really good with change. That's from new technologies, new kinds of software, how we communicate, the fact that people are consuming information so differently. And we also don't know what the next catastrophe might be around the corner. So being able to leverage data and advances in communication technologies is going to be so very important. But when I flipped that Indiana House seat blue in 2012, that was a door knocking campaign. And when I talk to other candidates that are thinking of running statewide or for federal office, I tell them, get ready, because campaigning feels so differently. And candidates need to have a great story, a great why. They need to have a great resume, but they also need to work their ass off. And that for me meant raising money to spend and hoarding that money to spend the last 3 months of the campaign, because that's what I could control. So call time for me, man, I put on 30 pounds, sitting, calling the West Coast as late as I could at night, and I raised more money than any congressional candidate has, including incumbents, Republicans in Indiana, and it got me pretty close. So when the magic strikes, and I firmly believe that, at least in my state, the luck will break. At some point, the guy that ran against me for lieutenant governor is now our governor. Mike Pence went on to become vice president. Holy Toledo. So we've been so lucky. That luck's going to break. And so if we put up good candidates that have good stories, that are in it for the right reasons, that are qualified, the other component we have to have is they have to be really hard workers and do what it takes to win, whether it's knocking on doors or raising dollars, and then being ready to pivot. As we know, life and change is only going to continue to accelerate, and as Democrats, we're just going to have to work smarter.
A couple of quick thoughts, then, to answer a couple of the questions I see Roger putting in the chat. There isn't like a DCCC fund that gives to candidates. It's not what they do. It's not in their specific lane. So I think we can look to other great organizations that may want to start looking at specifically highlighting and putting in front of their supporters great candidates running in rural areas. Maybe that's the one country. Maybe it's something else. But the point is, yes, don't look to the D-Trip for that. But look to the organizations that you're supporting right now and ask them to do more. And this could be one way to help. And then the second piece, Roger, you also said that there's major odds over spending bills. I love this because I think it's exactly the heart of what part our problem is right now, which is the folks who are controlling that conversation in DC are disconnected from the lived experiences of a lot of folks in their districts. As opposed to what the donors are saying. And so, when you ask any one of the components of a lot of those pieces, whether we're talking about childcare, it's hard to find it in rural areas, and it's hard to find it in urban areas. You're talking about healthcare. I was dealing with folks who are worried about our hospitals shutting down in rural areas. And so, can the Build Back Better plan help with parts of that? The point is that if we can solve part of this big money versus connecting with big people, out in the world, it could actually be really helpful in changing our policy priorities. So what's my advice to prevent people from being torn apart? My answer there is, if you want to stop people from being torn apart, then don't leave anybody behind. And one of the best ways we can do that is by doing work in places where we're not sure we can win, but by doing some of this base building, this movement building, that's getting people to rethink about how they see parties and the role of government in their lives. Those are all things that I think can help bridge the divide and move us forward together, one country.
That's great, and I think we just got a few minutes left. I did want to. I'm the son of a sixth grade school teacher and also the son of a downwinder, which is a big issue for us out west. And for any of you powerful people on the call, please support the RECA extension in DC. But I brought a couple of things, and I want to close off. This is a tea kettle from the eastern edge of Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden used to live. And if we could de-escalate there, I sure think we can do it here. But I think it's really going to require what we've talked all week about. And yes, I chose this coffee mug for a reason, which is to have a hell of a lot of coffee in the places that we don't usually stop at. Again, I did 8,000 miles in an 18-year-old truck. Everyone on the panel today has their own stories. But the party, I think, really needs to invest in people, not just in districts and the lines that are being redrawn. Because I feel like what we're in is in a counterinsurgency campaign in our country right now, and it's that important. And I know other speakers throughout this great summit, and thank you, Senator Heitkamp, have talked about that. So what I would hope is that our party actually reaches to the races that we lost maybe by the most. And what were the conversations and what was the vocabulary that Jon, Christina, JD, and Secretary Espy, myself, and many others actually had to develop? What are the issues that people led with in rural Utah or rural Mississippi or Iowa or Indiana or Michigan? And then what did we end with? And then finally, two things. I wish we could issue each of you one of these, which is what the Marines gave me over there. But it's taking off the Kevlar and going into the communities, I think, that are going to turn our country. And then the nerd that I am as a writer, I don't think we've got a lot of time. This is an hourglass that was on Ray Bradbury's desk. It's my most prized possession. But, the sand is falling. And for all the people on the call that I don't see, we've got time, I think, to bring our country together. But we don't have as much time as I think some people believe we do. So I think we've hit the witching hour. We've got a couple more minutes. I don't want to have the last word. So if anyone would like to add anything else, I would encourage for all of you out there, you too can make a difference. Go to our Twitter feeds, go to One Country, find the candidates you like, invite them to the places where you can get donors around a table or on a Zoom call, and let's invest in the candidates who are running in the reddest areas. Anyone want to follow up with anything?
Yeah, I'm going to close out so I don't have to follow Secretary Espy. My answer is thank you for being here. Make sure we're all still doing things, right? Because all of us are motivated by our why, like Christina said. So if you take a chance, follow us on Twitter, stay engaged. There's a lot more coming, and we're not giving up on rural America, and you aren't either.
I'd just like to say the stakes have never been higher, and they're going to continue to get higher. And your active and engagement and involvement in this project all over rural America is critical. And your being here and participating in this conference is just really appreciated and valued, and looking forward to all of you paying it forward.
Well, I'll say that I'm not a cynic. I'm very encouraged about the prospect of Democratic victories in the near-term future in rural America, because if you look at the census, you can just see the handwriting on the wall. America is becoming more and more diverse. It's becoming less and less white-centric, if you will, even in the rural areas, particularly in the urban states, Georgia and Florida. That's why there's such reaction and such embrace for somebody like Donald Trump. to save the old way of life, because if they see it slipping away, because they can see the numbers coming cascading against them. So all we have to do is just not to get discouraged. Keep running, keep building, keep embracing, keep growing, and keep reaching out to the National Democrats, helping them to understand that rural America is a part of America, and our votes count as well. Thank you.